we're being hyper efficient with who we hire because we want everyone to be super enabled by the kind of best in class tooling out there, AI or otherwise. And the second is that we want just like proficiency with AI to be as table stakes as numeracy, for example. And so that allows us to create a lot of impact with as small of a team as possible.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by not just one, but two 40-Minute Mentors, Nicky Goulimis and Nico Barawid, the founders of the early-stage FinTech Tunic Pay, the only fraud benders designed specifically for scams. Nicky and Nico are exceptional entrepreneurs who both have previously co-founded fintech and proptech startups. Nicky was a co-founder of Nova Credit, a credit infrastructure and analytics company that enables businesses to grow responsibly by harnessing alternative credit data. Nova Credit came through YC and raised over $100 million. And Nico built Casai, which was Latin America's largest short-term rental operator, raising over $50 million from incredible investors like Andreessen Horowitz. As second-time founders, Nicky and Nico bring incredible experience to the table, so I am super excited to dive into their experience in today's episode. Nicky and Nico, a big welcome to 40-Minute Mentor. It's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here. How are you both doing?
It is a beautiful day in London, and so we cannot complain when the sunshine is out, the birds are chirping, and we're on a podcast with you, James.
That is, yeah, I mean, let's just end it there. That was lovely.
Yeah. One day we said, Nico, we'll be happy like this.
And that was a great podcast. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening.
I love it. No, there's nothing better than London when the sun. I'm sat here in Soho. The sun is streaming through. This is the perfect setup for a wonderful conversation. I'm really excited for this. You both have had amazing careers, amazing entrepreneurial experiences. So I can't wait to dive in and hear all about it. But before we do, we're going to do what we like to do, which is warm you up with some quick fire questions. So maybe we'll go ladies first, Nicky, if you don't mind. So please finish the following sentences after me. The moment that defined my career was when?
I mean, this is going to be cheesy, but the moment that defined my career was when I met Nico. So I got to meet Nico almost 10 years ago when we were working together at Nova Credit. And then he then built another business after that, had moved to another side of the world. And yeah, maybe the moment that really defined my career was when we got back together and started working together 2 and a bit years ago. And for me, it was just like working with someone so creative. I had been at the time kind of working on various extremely bad startup ideas. Nico walked back into my life and we kind of just got this new energy and dynamism to move forward, new creativity. And it was just night and day. So there you go. That's the last nice thing I'm saying on this podcast.
Oh, that is lovely. That is so nice. It's a perfect dream team. Well, swap between the two. What about you, Nico? What is the moment that defined your career?
Well, now I've had both time to reflect and also time to feel bad for not. But I think really it was a realization that I didn't have to build a career or companies in the US where I grew up. And for me, I think my career after that realization has been defined by the cross-border nature of what I've been doing. So when Nicky and I first met, that was a business, yes, in San Francisco, but focused on international credit data. After that, I built a company in Mexico and Brazil. To start Tunic Pay, I moved to London. And there's something so enriching, intellectually invigorating about having to rapidly learn about the context of a new country. That's like, in our case, regulations in a new financial regulations in a new country. When I was building in Mexico, what it's like to just build a labor force in a different country, in a different language in that case. And so I think that that will continue to define my career, I hope.
What a great answer. I guess different one for the second question. My biggest failure to date is, so Nico, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I think when I first started right out of college, and then even in my first kind of career moves, including when I was working with Nicky at Nova Credit, my reputation was for someone that was nice and was really easy to get along with. And I think when I became my own boss as an entrepreneur, round one, I realized that the most consequential decisions are the ones that are the hardest. And so I think my biggest failures to date are kind of avoiding the tough conversations to the point where it impacts business performance. And so things like having hard conversations about letting go of people, having hard conversations about shutting down business units or business lines, all of those things, not realizing that I needed to do something and then not doing it fast enough, I think have been my biggest failures to date.
It's so relatable for me, actually, but also I'm sure for a lot of our audience. So I appreciate you saying that. Something that I think is a necessary evil. It's something that you have to learn to have those difficult, but it's still really difficult, especially if you are a certain way inclined. What about you, Nick?
One thing I was thinking about is like doing a startup is not dignified, right? Like you have to put yourself out there, you have to be experimenting with different approaches. And like actually, I can think of a ton of things we've done wrong, things I'm embarrassed about, failures, things like that. But at the same time, I think it's so important that you leave that failure zone to exist. I think it's really easy to be like, hey, this thing happened and this was wrong, and let's all go and like chastise each other. But actually, I think as a result, you won't move fast. And so not quite on the like, move fast and break things. Obviously, we work with highly sensitive customer data and complex infrastructure. But I do think you need to experiment. And if you constantly give feedback to the team around like, hey, this was a mistake, this was a failure, don't do this. Next time, check more. Next time, do more of this process. Create a culture where you're not allowing that zone of failure, of hiring mistakes, which, is part of taking a bet on someone too. You need to allow enough of it to exist. And so kind of straddling that allowance for it and never being too conservative is what we've talked about.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. It's so true. I mean, you really don't ever truly develop if you don't have the space to make mistakes and learn from them. So I think it's having that sort of culture where you can empower people to make decisions and sometimes get it wrong. I think that's actually really important. A skill I wish I had mastered earlier is
That one's easy. I feel like it's sales. So I think in some version, everything in business is sales. You're selling to a potential employee, you're selling to a potential customer, you're selling to an investor. And I think, I had all of it's a little bit of the baggage of the like, this is snake oil. I don't want to be one of those people, but also a sense of we just need to focus on the product. We need to have the best models, the best technical infrastructure. And that's where I'm going to spend all of my time. And actually, I've learned the importance of, again, putting yourself out there and doing the sales motion and not denigrating that skill.
Yeah, great answer. What about you, Nico?
I think it's related, but maybe just one aspect of that sales piece that I wish I had mastered earlier was specifically around storytelling. To Nicky's point, you can have the best code base to the nth degree, but if you can't tell the story around what it can do, how it's differentiated, if you can't tell the story of your business to the board and create a narrative around what's going well and what's not going well, if you can't create a lore for employees that you're trying to hire, nothing that you've done really matters. And so I think sales wholeheartedly agree with Nicky, but for me specifically, I wish I had been able to like piece together data points and create that narrative for their career too.
Yeah, great. I love that. And that's something I think we can all continually work on and evolve at. It's something that I know people that have who that come on this podcast actually said they were really not very good or didn't feel at all confident with that skill set. But over time they've really honed that craft. And a good storyteller, especially as a founder, it helps in so many ways. And whether it's pitching to investors, customers, hires, like executive hires, being able to tell that story in a compelling way is so powerful. So yeah, I love that answer.
There's a point in your career, right, where you're evaluated not just on the analysis that you do, but how you tell the story around that analysis. Like Nicky and I both used to be management consultants right out of university. And there are kind of KPIs or around like, did you do the Excel correctly? But now as founders, like that's almost table stakes. Like now we have to go further and say, what does the analysis say about the strategy that we're trying to pursue or the client that we're trying to win?
Yeah, that's so true. Thank you. Final quick fire question. A life lesson I keep coming back to is?
Maybe this is a life lesson just post-COVID when all of us were cooped up in our apartments. And in my case, I had no sunlight in my apartment and didn't realize the kind of photosynthetic nature that I have. But I think for me, it is the importance of being in person. I think there's such a temptation post-COVID to build a remote first culture and to kind of afford that flexibility to everyone. But I realize when I'm collaborating with Nicky and the team in person, being able to go to the whiteboard at a moment's notice and not needing to schedule a Zoom call and then like have an agenda. It's in those moments of in-person collaboration where magic is created. And so I keep coming back to that because my own kind of preferences post-COVID are like, I would rather just like, be on my bed and answer emails that way. But actually I get so invigorated and I have so much better ideas in mind.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Nicky?
I feel like you taught me this once. Nico jokingly quoted the royal family at me. He was like, never complain, never explain. But I do think that's a life mantra. I think about that with my kids, but I also think about that with myself. Like, don't complain. Like, we're very lucky to get to build this business. We're very lucky in lots of places. And I think bringing kind of that positive energy is really important. And I think founders are trying to do something really hard. Sometimes that can be challenging. They can feel like the world is against them, but also like, it's a huge privilege what we get to do every day, that you get to like try new things. And I think it's kind of an attitude that reflects really well around you if you don't institutionalize kind of complaining.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I sometimes check myself and I'm like, oh God, I feel so overwhelmed. There's got so many searches, so many like running the business. And then I'm like, well, this is a good thing. Like, it means we're in business. It means I can pay the mortgage. It means we're placing leaders into companies that could be changing the world.
I can fix things. I can change things.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's sometimes good just to have a word with yourself when you're getting neggy.
For instance, coming back to the UK, I feel like we do love a good.
Oh, we love a moan. We love a moan. Yes. I think there's trying to create some space to do the odd venting over a drink or whatever. But
that's essential.
Yeah, we all need to vent.
It's very different from complaining.
This is true. Yeah. I mean, nobody likes a mood hoover either, especially when you're together in person. You really want to that positive vibe is so important, especially when you're trying to solve hard problems. Awesome answers. I am already enjoying every second of this. And we've got to dive into your story and talk about Tunic Pay. But before we get there, you are both clearly very entrepreneurial people. So I would love to know, has that always been the case? Is this something, were you those kids in the playground selling sweets, doing lemonade stands? Or tell me about the origin story of your entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely not.
No,
I was doing my homework. Yeah.
Actually, one time my little brother needed $1 to pay for something and I tried to loan it to him with interest. And then my mom was like, that's usury. And so then my entrepreneurial instincts were cut off then.
You were like, what about unpaid access? It's not interest. It's just a fee. We'll see what the regulator says.
What about you, Nicky? Because I guess maybe it wasn't you were.
No, I don't think I was. I mean, I think both of us are really lucky in that we have entrepreneurial parents. And so they both have run their own businesses and kind of like seeing that autonomy and also that sort of like just creativity throughout has probably shaped both of us in lots of ways. And so I think I kind of like grew up a little bit around that world at a time where starting a business, being entrepreneurial was not sexy like it is today. And so definitely I remember like at weekends going to my dad's office and me and my sister would like pretend to be coding things. We would like tap on a wooden table while he was working and just be like, I have 5 units of this. Yeah, hours of fun. So I think like I had like seen that around me, but I was not the person who did the lemonade stand. And I think that was just kind of, it's a mindset thing. I think I feel very lucky to, I got to go to business school in the States. And I think that's where I kind of just like that approach, that openness to experimentation, just build something, put it out there, test it. I took a class at Stanford called Lean Launchpad that really emphasizes that. I think that's where I first saw that. And I kind of fell in love with the magic, the making something out of nothing is so addictive. So now I'm not doing anything else.
I think another commonality that you and I both have is that our parents are not American or British. And I mean, all of the stats show that immigrants are much more likely to be entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs. And that resonates in, I think, both of our parents' case and also both of our cases, because my parents were not native speakers of English, neither were your parents. And there's something very entrepreneurial about having to navigate an entirely different set of laws and circumstances and cultural norms that is kind of inculcated in me, at least from an early age, where there was very much an emphasis on challenging the orthodoxy, and we don't have a huge support network to fall back on, either in terms of resources or in terms of family. And so the only way that you can make it in life is by optimizing what you have in front of you. And so I too was not the kind of lemonade stand entrepreneur, but I was having to translate from Tagalog into English from an early age for my parents. There's something about that leadership.
And
sticks with me.
ringleading your siblings.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing too,
when you were trying to monetize them.
I realize I'm just now remembering I'm the eldest, and I would have to pick up my siblings from school, and my parents would give me money to take them out to like a sushi dinner or something. And so what I would do is I would take them to McDonald's and then pocket the change.
I love that. It is surprising.
I'm not sure we should be building a business together.
Do you know what? It's really interesting. It's so funny because I was reflecting on this today when I was thinking about, I am not from a family of entrepreneurs at all. My parents are teachers. They're actually teachers and preachers. They're Anglican priests. I have no entrepreneurs in my family. And yet I started my business when I was 25, and that's all really I've ever done. And I was trying to think why and where did that come from? And then I was thinking, actually, well, it is also that immigrant mentality. I think my dad came over to England from India on a boat in his 50s, and he had to he was telling me how he had to get rid of his accent and learn English as quickly as possible. And then he was like, I need to be the smartest person so I can get a scholarship in school and then get to, and he always was just like pushing. And I think that kind of competitive drive, that is, I guess, where maybe the entrepreneurialism comes from. And it's just so many people like your parents and whether it's first or second generation immigrants have come on this podcast and they say that. And it's so interesting. It's something to be cherished and really celebrated. You also both, I get a sense of a love for fintech, or maybe you don't, but you just spend a lot of time in it. So why fintech? Has that come from anything particular in your upbringing or just in general, or was it just something that you stumbled into?
I think there's probably a few different facets to that. I think we're both kind of problem solvers. And so I think in the spaces that we've worked in, it's been kind of like real human problems that we've seen. Right now, there is an epidemic around scams all over the world, and it is one that is only getting bigger and more complex every day. And it impacts humans in so many ways. A human who gets scammed not only loses their money, but they also lose their confidence. They stop leaving their house. And, kind of our perspective in it was kind of this naivete of we've previously worked in a space that a different problem around helping immigrants access credit. And that's a different challenge. But the same set of data infrastructure could make this problem go away. So why does this problem exist? Why are we allowing it to exist? And so I think it always came slightly from the human element and then probably more the data side than the pure fintech side. But I think we've, also got to witness different financial systems around the world and what works and what doesn't work and what's exciting with them.
Totally. And in between kind of fintech round one with Nicky and fintech round two with Tunic Pay, I was building a prop tech in Latin America, and I was basically effectively a hospitality merchant with the rise of Pix in Brazil, right? So we started our business in Brazil right before Pix took off. And I was watching this new payment method that enabled peer lending. I was watching the massive adoption of that. And there was something really mysterious about what was happening that I really wanted to dig into. And I was only looking at it from an arm's length as, a merchant that was trying to accept this payment method. But as Nicky and I were battling around ideas of what to do next, we kept coming back to the human impact of the financial infrastructure in particular. And I think that's where both we feel the most confident, because that's where a lot of our is, but also the most intellectually intrigued by.
Yeah, I love that. We're going to come on to talk about Tunic Pay, but before then, you both have, as alluded to, built successful businesses. So this is your sort of second time around. So for our audience that may not know about the companies you built before, do you mind just giving a very brief summary of the startups that you built, and perhaps one of the biggest takeaways or lessons from that experience, as a first-time founder? I don't know which one you want to go first, but love to hear that.
So I previously co-founded a business called Nova Credit, which, as I mentioned, is a credit bureau for the thin file population, whether that's immigrants or people who are new to credit. We started that business in 2016, did YC, raised a seed round of Series A, Series B, Series C, scaled a lot internationally, and have partnered with some of the biggest financial institutions, telcos, property managers in the world, folks like Verizon, American Express, but also served a few million end consumers. I think lessons from that journey, I think there are many. I think our product obviously evolved a lot, but so did our customer base. And I think we were probably a little late in looking at international markets, which is now, we started the business in the US, we're serving US customers, but now some of our biggest customers are in Canada, in the UK, the UAE, Singapore. And so I think thinking about international early and not being scared to do that. Yeah, it can feel daunting again to get on a call where, maybe people are speaking a different language or it's not their first language and kind of there's a different regime and localization, but it creates so much opportunity for us and so much product learning, I think, is really important. I think the other thing is kind of, always bringing in that product flexibility and co-creating with customers. I think I had a little bit of a naive view of like, we must kind of be at arm's length. And when we come to them with a product, everything is perfect. And then we discuss it and then we implement it. But actually like really embedding, like pretty much, every big product launch, we'd like move in, or big customer launch, sorry, we'd like move in next door, next to our customers' teams, get an Airbnb for a couple of weeks there and just like really be working with them, which is probably only true of like enterprise partnerships or larger business partnerships. But I think it is the core to success is that really deep embedding. And then, yeah, I'm sure lots of, I'm telling you kind of the highs, but also lots of lows are along the way, like when the RBI in India shut us down or things like that. There were all, my co-founder Brooks, lots of lows along the way too. But I think just keeping going is sometimes need.
Yeah, great advice. What about you, Nico?
So as a bit of context of how Nikki and I know each other, as she mentioned, I was the first non-engineer to join Nova Credit. And so was there building that with Nikki and her co-founders in the early days in San Francisco. And then I left to start my own business in Latin America, focused on hospitality. Like I mentioned, we ended up becoming one of the largest prop techs in Latin America, the largest hospitality startup in Latin America, raised about 50 million in financing from really excellent local investors with Silicon Valley investors, grew pretty substantially. And I would say the enduring lessons are, I can think of a couple off the bat. The first is that was very much a direct to consumer business, whereas Nova Credit was a big enterprise software company. And the enduring lesson from that was really, I mentioned this earlier with storytelling, but the importance of marketing. I think similarly early on in my career, I saw kind of marketing as a purely aesthetic function that only people from art school can do. But it turns out, similar to sales marketing and kind of the impression among your customer base, in this case, a consumer customer base, is supremely important. It is much more important than the strategy that you put in slides that no one else looks at. And so even though, again, we've gone back to building enterprise software, we still have very much a consumer angle, which we'll talk about. And I think the lessons around building trust, right? Like with hospitality, people are paying you $1,000 to stay in a hotel room and, they're literally showering in your apartment. And so it's a really intimate experience you have. And so the brand that you create needs to engender trust. And so that has stayed with me. And then I would say the other lesson that endures is, this is really interesting. So again, my prior experience before that was at Nova Credit, very much a Silicon Valley company with people that were, really direct with feedback and were all kind of former consultants or bankers or whatever. And so I brought that culture to Mexico City. And so in our first holiday party, I gave company swag out. And I got a lot of feedback actually that was not the right holiday gift because I was employing people that were housekeeping workers in our apartments and people of all different social classes. And it made me realize the importance of, I think when people talk about localization, they think about like translating from English to Spanish and whatever, but there's really an element of localization around building for the culture that you're building in, being humble about the kind of culture that you're bringing to the company. And also people get offended when they're like, oh, there's a lot to learn from Mexico or Brazil in the UK, but it's true, like the financial sector in Brazil has leapfrogged what's happened in the UK. And I think that humility and that like degree of respect has stuck with me as well.
This episode is sponsored by Capsule, the certified B Corp redefining insurance for high-growth scaling businesses. As a neo-broker powered by cutting-edge API technology, Capsule streamline the insurance process, removing manual hassle and delivering tailored solutions that evolve with your business. They support ambitious companies across fast-paced, innovative sectors such as FinTech, health tech, SaaS, and sustainability, including clients like Bloom & Wild, Moneybox, Castor, and What 3 Words. If you're a venture-backed startup looking to outsource the buying and management of your insurance, find out more on www.capsulecover.com. Now, back to today's 40-Minute Mentor.
And you both decided to go again, which is, given all the success you've had, I'm sure some people will listen, why go through this pain all over again? But clearly coming back together has sparked something incredible. So do you mind telling us a bit about the origin story of Tunic Pay and I guess particularly how the business works, what problem you're solving, and for our audience that may not have come across it yet?
Sure. So In the early months of 2023, after I had sold my last company, Casai, and Nicky had moved back to the UK after Nova Credit, we decided to partner back up together again and were thinking about what did we want to do next. And it actually wasn't obvious that that next adventure together would be a software company, right? Like we were looking at installing heat pumps in homes in the UK to help with emissions and other kind of like small business ideas.
I'm not battery science for it.
Yeah. But I think ultimately what we realized, Nicky already spoke about it, was that one, we were super passionate about the human impact of fintech innovations. Two, part of the reason that we started on this idea specifically was that we spoke to all of our old customers from Nova Credit, who were the chief risk officers of big banks like HSBC, JP Morgan, et cetera. And they told us that their institutions, which are some of the largest banks in the world, fraud losses were exceeding credit losses, which is kind of a remarkable statistic. And so we realized that with that network, with our experience building Nova Credit, with our passion for marrying kind of the human impact with fintech infrastructure, there was a real excitement to build something in this space, but also a recognition that we could build round two in a way that was for us, meaning that we could optimize for real results rather than hype. We could build the team in a really deliberate way rather than seeing hiring as a vanity metric. And so I think when we both re-understood that we were optimizing around the same goalposts for our companies and for our co-founding relationship with each other, there was really no other choice than to hop back into building a company and then doing so in fintech again.
Love that. And so it sounds like you're very deliberately building in a different way to see how you built your first businesses. You alluded briefly to that just then, but do you mind sharing in a bit more detail what that actually means, and perhaps the things that maybe you have taken with you from your last experience, but maybe the more explicit things you've really purposely done differently?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few kind of like North Star metrics in kind of terms of the product that we really focus on. I think this was something I really admired with Wise. I actually can't remember exactly what they are, but they always talk about fees, speed. I can't remember. They have like three things they always focus on. And we've kind of taken that as well to kind of taken this long-term orientation around our product. Because I think it's very easy to get caught up in like, oh, we're just going to deliver what this customer wants or as quickly as possible. And you need to balance that. But you kind of also really need to have this really clear long-term view, which for us is around, first of all, is just like how delightful is our experience. In the world of scams and fraud, there's a lot of fear and protect yourself. But actually, are we making this a positive experience? I think the second is just around actually how effectively are we preventing scams? What are we driving here? And then the final piece is around kind of actually false positives, making sure that we're not just putting people through unnecessary experiences. And so we've kind of been really deliberate about kind of long term. And, some of those things we're performing really well on, and some of those things we won't for another couple of years, but just having a more long term view to start with. And then I think, some of the elements that you're talking about with like team and culture, I think for us, we've both like really loved, Nico's previous company was 450 people at its peak. And so we've both really loved actually being in a smaller team and getting to be really scrappy and getting to build and getting to use all of the latest tooling that we have. And so, not necessarily as, not just as a vanity metric of hiring, but also just as a like flexibility and agility of team. I don't think we're fortunate to have capital where we could have accelerated growing the team faster earlier, or we could be hiring more people right now. But we see a lot of value in that flexibility and that learning and doing it yourself. I think your ego does get caught up, especially in the kind of VC-backed startup journey. There's the you maybe start with your motivations for why you want to build a company. And then along the way, it's, are you presenting at this conference? Are you, I don't know, a Forbes 30 under 30? Are you, is your VC the shiniest type of money possible? And all of those things, I think, yeah, that, obviously there's some element of like brand building as a company that you need to do, but they can also they can be distractions. And so being really clear about like, why do I want to do this? What is a company, or how is it serving me? And then being clear about like the metrics of satisfaction. We have, we talk about kind of, what is our framework for satisfaction and joy in the company? And we have our own personal metrics that we won't share publicly today. And, some of them are just about also having fun in the everyday. And some of them are about a whole series of other things and kind of allowing ourselves to not take it too seriously too.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. It's really nice. I guess doing it the second time around does not mean there won't be challenges and mistakes made. And I think it's really important. We always like to talk about those on this podcast, particularly. So a bit like founder therapy for all the founders listening to this that might be going through a rough patch at the moment. So do you mind sharing some of the bits that have been more challenging this time around, and maybe how you've overcome that, or just things you've learned from the more difficult parts of the build?
Okay, so I don't want to be ridiculous, but I don't think it's been that hard yet. And that's not just like because we've got everything sorted or we know 100% what we're doing. I think it's one, having like an amazing partnership and an amazing team, kind of giving that confidence. And then, yeah, like I say, like being okay with some things failing and some things not working. So, of course, I don't know. I think so far we also can't say that there have been too many challenges. Sorry, I feel like I'm not giving the answer.
No, I mean, I think because of the trust that our decade of working together has engendered, we can give each other and try to kind of flow this down to the rest of the team really rapid and direct feedback, knowing that we're coming from a place of improvement and trust. And what that means is that hard times are actually times for improvement and times for making sure that we're being ambitious enough. And so I find myself actually, after what normally might be hard times for a startup, pirouetting from joy.
That's true, actually. I do feel like you like a crisis.
I do. I love a crisis. I never let one go to waste.
There was a point like we were like, literally nothing is working. We need to pivot the entire business. Let's like go do some research and read a bunch of papers and figure out a like crypto protocol was, I think, the idea at the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but like, I think you like loved and relished that and you were like ready to just like go into attack mode. Whereas I was like, it's all failing.
No, I sat at a Jean-Michel Basquiat exhibition and I was like, that's chaos. This is not chaos.
And do you know what? I think it's probably also something about you've built businesses before. You've probably seen every possible thing that could have gone wrong before. So that probably brings it. There's probably a calmness that comes with that, and the fact that you have such a strong partnership. I mean, it's really amazing to see, and that trust. I think you can probably get through anything really. So you probably look at things maybe slightly differently to perhaps somebody that's never done this before, maybe doesn't have that partner. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, I think for me personally, Nico doesn't agree, but for me personally, partnership is a big part of the answer, right? Like you can face anything together. And I think, like I think we also, it's just worth acknowledging that so far we have had problems in terms of like, is this working? But that's to be expected. We've not had problems in terms of one of us. We've seen what hard times look like at a company, and right now, the joy of having started a company, a year and a half ago is that the only way is up. And so it feels like you don't have a negative to compare it to.
Yeah, fair enough. It's probably a good time to say sort of where are you up to in the general scheme of things for the business, and I would love to know sort of what the future holds over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah. So kind of early days, it seems to be working. So we have deployed our products with a number of tier one banks and some of the more tech focused banks in the UK. We are super proud of the fact that we've already stopped a whole bunch of scams, broken the spell for the customer, but also accelerated the release of genuine payments. We kind of see ourselves as a core part of the payment infrastructure and not slowing down payments. Money moving real time is great for consumers, great for the economy. And so stopping that would be terrible. So yeah, early days of that, it's working. A big focus for us is kind of expanding and rolling that out more deeply, integrating more deeply with our partners. And then everything we've been doing so far has been kind of on the faster payment rails in the UK, but we're starting to look at other payment mechanisms. So things like cards, because you also, scams actually operate on lots of different rails, not just they're easier on faster payments, but they also operate on stable coins, on anything crypto, anything that kind of moves the money real time is a good candidate. So starting to look at that. And then I think the other area for us, hopefully, will be some element of international. But for the moment, I should say, all those things sound fun, but we have to be pretty heads down on just delivering. I think the highest praise I think we got from one of our customers recently was like, your product does everything it said it would do on the tin, which doesn't sound like super high praise, right? It's not like, I absolutely love it. But I think like that is the key, delivering day in, day out. Last week, we had an incident. Our systems were down for just under 2 hours. Our team handled it immediately, properly, resilience at scale, and just kind of continuing to deliver across all the small things to earn the trust, I think is the only way to work right now.
So important. Love it. Thank you for sharing. Given the partnership, given your track records, it's unsurprising to me that you've raised a lot of money and that investors want to back you and come on this journey with you. But we know that fundraising is not always easy. And so would love to hear a bit more about your experience of fundraising previously and this time around, and particularly any advice you have for other founders listening to this that are kind of embarking on this journey, perhaps for the first time, things that have worked for you, or just general pointers that can help them on what can be a brutal journey at times?
I guess I have two reflections on that. One is that it is very true that cash is a commodity. And so, especially as second-time founders that have worked with, as you say, many investors in Silicon Valley and globally, Nicky and I developed a strong set of preferences of the support that we want from our investors. And in particular, that support was how do they act in the end game? So either when the company is going through tough times, or when the company has some exciting news and it's going through an acquisition, what are they optimizing for? Are they going to be honest? And are they going to stand up for what they believe in? Or are they going to leave the company out high and dry? Related to that is...
And I guess actually, like, we would never have done that first time round. But
Yeah.
actually this time, when we were looking at our seed, we actually asked a bunch of the founders that people had invested in. Because the probabilistic outcome is we're going to fail. So like our probabilistic outcome, just empirically speaking, is like it doesn't work out 2 years from now, and that sucks. And so how are they going to treat us in that outcome is probably actually more important than everyone's super nice to you. It's going well.
When we did reference calls for investors, we asked them to introduce us to founders with whom it did not work out, and what would those founders have said. And with one of our investors, Local Globe here in the UK, the founder references were universal, that they would come back to them again. And again, these were founders with whom the first relationship didn't end in an IPO. And so I think looking past investors' capital as the main value add and how they stick up for you was really important for us. And I would say the second lesson that we took this time around versus the first time around is that it's very hard to predict who's going to be helpful despite the amount of diligence that you do. And so this time we actually capped check sizes. We said, like, you cannot invest above this amount because we wanted to optimize for number of angels, number of investors. So we have the CEOs and founders of most of the fraud startups in the UK and globally. We have lots of bank executives. I mean, our cap table's a little crazy, but it's unknowable who's going to be helpful and not. And also, it does take an army to build the startup. And so having at our disposal people that are at the same stage as us, to people that IPO'd 10 years ago, to people that are at big corporates, like all of that has been supremely useful in the last, year and a half that we've been building the business.
The only other thing I'd add is like with that goal of like, it's hard to predict how, who's going to be useful, how they're going to treat you and things like that, is like trying to avoid the shotgun wedding dynamic. And so
Totally.
Obviously you don't want to be fundraising all the time. And I think it's really important to not be fundraising all the time. But when you are having conversations with investors, not being in a like, we need to decide in a week or else, either from you or from them, actually just trying to like get to know them a little bit more, like have lunch with them and spend more time getting to know them as humans outside of just kind of the metrics world is really important. And then I think the other thing, which is obvious and probably lots of people say, is like, it is a volume game. And so, if things aren't going well, just talk to more people, don't take it personally, move on quickly, more, like that's kind of the,
yeah.
Because the first time I think you ever get a rejection, if it's like, you don't love my beautiful product and my vision and think I'm not smart or shiny enough, like, yeah, but at the end of the day, like your job is to get money and to move on.
Yeah, very, very wise words of mentorship there. Thank you for sharing. And we're getting close to an end, but I can't not ask you about hiring and culture, given it's my sort of personal passion. Can you tell us a bit about how you're building Tunic Pay? You mentioned you're being is sort of you're not chasing vanity metrics when it comes to sort of massive headcount necessarily. So how are you building the team? And I'm sure there are going to be people listening to this that are like, I want to come on this journey with you. So would love to know though the sort of characteristics, the sorts of people that you want to come work alongside you at Tunic Pay. What really stands out to you?
Well, what a privilege to be building a company in the age of AI and specifically agentic AI. And that flows through every part of Tunic Pay, from the product that we're delivering to customers to the proficiency that we ask for with our candidates, right? And so when we're hiring engineers and we're hiring designers and we're hiring salespeople, what we do is see if in a case interview or, in a coding session, they use AI, and then note that positively, because Nicky likes to make fun of me that I am relentless. And
just like hover over your desk, be like, are you using enough AI?
Asking our engineers, like, what percentage of our code base is AI? And if it's not north of 90%, then we're not being, efficient enough.
We're not being enough of a caricature.
It pains me to read that in universities these days, they see AI as tantamount to cheating, whereas in startups, it's efficiency above all. It's AI is getting to the point that it can generate really excellent ideas. AI.
So my workflow is I do V1 of the work, then I have AI edit it and review it, and then I send it to Nico for final. It's like, that's the hierarchy.
No, AI is definitely the overlord of this company. So that, I think, answers your question in two ways. One is that we're being hyper efficient with who we hire because we want everyone to be super enabled by the kind of best in class tooling out there, AI or otherwise. And the second is that we want just like proficiency with AI to be as table stakes as numeracy, for example. And so that allows us to create a lot of impact with as small of a team as possible.
I'd say the other thing is like we've had some like amazing switches at the company. If I think about, for instance, our product designer, her background was more on the brand side and the graphic side, and kind of she entered the product side pretty much with us. And I think she's brought like fresh thinking in how she's approached the work here. And I think, kind of the advice you always get from your investors and, kind of from the community is always like, bring the person who's done the exact same thing before. But I think they're not always kind of the freshest or maybe the most motivated because they've done the exact same thing before. Wait, why are we doing this job? We've done the exact same thing before. Like we've loved having people who've kind of brought interesting experiences from either other sectors or other disciplines. And then, I think kind of throughout, there's so much room to be creative. And maybe one thing we've embraced is kind of this concept of like change is the only constant. I think I used to almost feel bad hiring people into a startup and like kind of want to mask it and be like, oh, you're not going to get chaos here. It's all, here is a structured process and here are clear goals. And the reality is it's like a lot is going to change and we have to be like flexible. And we prize people who relish that and are able to overlay some structure and clear sense of direction on top of that and are able to do excellent work in that environment. Everyone is. And if you're trying to fake and pretend that actually, you're bringing them to McKinsey, like they're not the right fit for you.
Yeah, totally. No, I completely agree. I think it's sort of a duty of care almost to be as transparent as possible about the reality of what you're facing. And I think it will self-select out. If that terrifies you, then it's definitely not right. And if you're excited by getting stuck into problems in the pace and the dynamics, like then you're probably going to really enjoy it.
But also people who don't mistake chaos for casualness. Once it's chaotic, it doesn't mean we're able to be chaotic because we do really excellent work and we're really clear about what it is and delivering. That does not like, hey, you can just like come in at 11 and actually like not be prepared for this thing just because you were invited to it 5 minutes ago, like you still got to show up and like prepare.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it's about ambiguity, isn't it? It's a bit able to handle ambiguity, able to adapt to different situations, solve problems on the fly, and actually embrace the intellectual curiosity of solving difficult problems and getting stuck in. Yeah, I love all of that. And it's actually really nice to hear about the switches, because I think over the last couple of years, I found it a bit frustrating with some of the searches we've run where it's just been so like they must have done this exact leadership role in this exact stage of company. And I understand it because there's a lot at stake, particularly for leadership hiring. But sometimes, especially at the more junior levels, there are some exceptional people that I just know can slot in and add value and bring fresh perspectives.
And actually like home growing more of your talent, especially kind of on likely to have like a leadership team or anything like that. But I think can often be like vastly superior. Like, I think about credit some of the folks who've had like a massive impact with the people who grew within versus this trying to, again, like satisfy or impress someone else by hiring the VP of blah, 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 who's done exactly this before. Like it doesn't always work. And again, like we're too early to have anything far more rigid. But like I think about another one of our colleagues, like Maya, who joined our company and has just every day takes on more responsibility and more impact and has figured out more things to the point where like, she joined this startup early, like did everything, was super scrappy, but also was strategic. I think she's bent the trajectory of the company and is now like building out her team. And that's like so cool and exciting for us to see.
That's amazing. Love that. Absolutely love that. We sadly have two final questions. It's time to wrap up, and I'm gutted because I've absolutely loved this. But I have to ask you, this is 40-minute mentor. So if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Okay, I'll go first. Nico knows this and likes to make fun of this about me, but I'm a big fan of Jamie Dimons. Like he can be a little abrasive and put people off. He's been wrong on crypto, but I think his like crisis leadership is like outstanding. Like how he took COVID and actually like JP Morgan Chase did better through that, how like the SVB collapsed, they did better. Every single time a crisis hit, he comes out the other side. And then I think he's done an amazing job on kind of making big, bold, long-term bets and having a strategy that is globally minded. That is what they've done in the UK and now in Europe, I think is really like an outstanding product that was kind of launched overnight by a mega bank. And so I have huge respect for him. And then I think, everyone that I've got to work with at Chase over the years, it's an awesome leadership team. And I imagine that comes down from him.
Nice. What about you, Nico?
I really like this question. And I'm cheating a little bit because this is a book that Nicky is currently reading. For me, with no hesitation, it's Lee Kuan Yew, the kind of founding father of Singapore and the first prime minister. I mean, just on results alone, he transformed Singapore from effectively a trading port to one of the world's most prosperous, well-governed countries in the span of a generation and a half. And I think in particular for me, it's this combination of ruthless pragmatism with long-term vision. His leadership style is deeply strategic. He invested decades before anyone else did in the education sector, in infrastructure, in a rule of law that attracts businesses. And people only saw the results of those investments, in some cases after he died. And I think in particular, what fascinates me is how he has held fast to first principles, even when deeply unpopular. And yet his views evolved over time. And so sadly, I will never get the chance to meet him. But if I could wish for one mentor from any time in history, it would very much be him.
And possibly, a person the world needs right now.
Yeah.
100%. That's a great answer. Thank you. Final question. Is there any final piece of advice that you would like to leave our listeners with? That could be career or life, departing a bit of wisdom.
Nicky mentioned it, and so I'm cheating again, but I think for me, the most important lesson that I've taken from 2 startups, from working with Nicky, is the importance of just like smiling every day and having fun. I think it's really, really difficult to kind of overemphasize the importance of coming to work every day with, a cheery disposition, with a sense of gratitude that, we're in this position. I mean, even in the course of this podcast, Nicky and I were like, what are some words that we can just like throw in? And like, it's been...
Nico won. You got Basquiat.
It just makes...
I got the quarter zip though.
It makes you really fun. And again, like allows us to like get through the hard times together. And so I think that spans business, that spans personal life.
Yeah. Maybe the thing I'll add, and I imagine there's a few people who are thinking about like, is now the good time for me to start a company? Is now the good time for me to join a startup? And I'll basically say like, there's never a good time. Like there's never a good time where it's going to look great on paper. Just, except maybe for some very, very narrow exceptions for a very narrow, like quite privileged tranche of society who's like exactly 25 and like can afford blah, blah, blah. But there's not really a good time to start a startup. When I started Nova Credit, it was just like straight out of graduating from business school with a ton of business school debt and probably not the smartest idea. Or actually, Tunic Pay, we started when I was like heavily, heavily pregnant. And I'm so grateful to Nico for that. But, that's life. Like things don't happen on your timings. And if it's something that you want, then the best day to start is today. So info@tunicpay.com. We're hiring.
Yeah, well, I would thoroughly recommend everybody reach out. That is really excited by your mission because you're both brilliant at what you do. You've been there and done it before. And I love the intentional nature of which you're building again and the fun with which you're doing it. It's so refreshing. And yeah, it just sounds like a lot of fun. If I wasn't building my own business, I'd send my CV to you myself. But thank you both so much for taking the time out of what I know will be a crazy busy schedule to talk to us and share your mentorship. It means a lot. And wishing you nothing but the best.
Thank you for all that you're doing. Really appreciate getting to hear so many cool voices on this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it both. Hope to see you soon in person, but yeah, wishing you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.